Hi, welcome to Zane Customs. In this episode, we're going to be sculpting Marvel Comics Venom. So I started this sculpt off in Forger like I always do, and I just started with the basic head and turned that into Venom. And you'll eventually see I add in a sphere and turn that into his chest and shoulders. And here, once I got him pretty much roughed out, I started going in and sculpting some more detail around his teeth and his gums. And this is actually a sculpt I did months and months ago. I have the original video on my Instagram, and you can tell I did it a long time ago because first off, it's not as good as something I would do now, but also you see me going in and adding all this detail right now, whereas I really should rough out the whole body and all that first. And you'll see towards the end of my session in Forger I end up running into some walls and I can't remesh them because I have too high poly counts and all these things. Just stuff that I would avoid nowadays, now that I know. But back then I kind of just jumped in and didn't know what I was doing. But yeah, here you can see I'm starting to sculpt out his chest, but I can't really do much more than that. I try remeshing it and it won't let me because I got weird topology and all those things, so I just decided to turn it into like a little statue or a bust, like I said earlier. But even like, it doesn't look good. The shoulders are all stretched and weird, and I'm just doing the best with what I can. But like I said, this is an old video. I sculpted this months and months ago, and you might have seen it if you follow me on Instagram. But eventually I do fix it and put it in Zbrush and make it look a lot better. So here, as you can see, it's now in Zbrush, and I skipped a few steps. A while back I was able to actually sculpt the rest of the body out in Forger in a low poly. I exported the model I had and then re-exported it as an OBJ, and it allowed me to remesh. So then from there I was able to extrude and add and do all those things, and I was able to make this body. And unfortunately I wasn't able to record that, but basically everything you see now is what I did in Forger, and now it's in Zbrush, and I'm just going to finish it out. And like I do with all my sculpts, it's symmetrical, but eventually I'm going to repose them as just leaving it in this pose because it's easier to sculpt. But yeah, as you can see, the face looks a lot more blurred than it did in Forger, and that's part of the process with remeshing. So if you're sculpting something and you have any weird angles, because everything's made out of triangles, so if you sculpt too much on one end, eventually you'll start to be able to tell it's just a bunch of triangles that are being stretched and manipulated. So if you remesh, it kind of reapplies a even coating of triangles all around, and you won't have weird stretches like I did on the shoulders in the previous sculpt. But when you do that, it also can blur a lot of areas, so that's why the teeth look like that. And again, Forger's not super powerful compared to Zbrush, so that was about as good as I could go on the iPad. But now that I'm in Zbrush, I can actually subdivide and give a lot more details. So as you watch this video, you can tell my process is kind of jumbled. I just jump around the model just to work on whatever I want to at that moment. If I'm having a hard time with something, I'll jump onto something else and just keep going back and forth. And I find that it helps to kind of take a break from something, and especially if you're not liking how it's going but you don't know what's wrong with it, just take a break, move to a different part of the model, and then when you come back, usually you'll realize, oh, this is what I'm not liking about it. Right here I'm working on his arms and his hands, and you'll see me working on his hands a lot. It was one of the hardest things for the sculpt to work on. Hands are just hard in general. I think most people would agree with that, but I definitely have a hard time with the hands. And even I get him to a pretty well finished state, but then eventually I go back and change them, because like right here at the end of his fingers, he basically just has claws like a dragon or something would have, just coming right out the end of his fingers like a talon. But later on I go in and I make it look more like a fingernail, just like a long sharp fingernail, because I didn't feel like it really looked like venom. But like I said, you'll see me spend a lot of time on his hands and fingers in particular, because it's one of the harder things for me. Okay, so right here you can see me masking off the top of his body and one leg, so I can actually pose the opposing leg. And like I said, I leave him symmetrical for sculpting purposes, because it's easier to sculpt one side, and if you have the mirror function on, it'll sculpt the other side as well. But now that I got him detailed how I want, I'm going to go ahead and pose him how I want. And posing is a difficult process for me, just the masking and moving, and it takes a long time. And you'll see I started sculpting and figured I had him in a pretty well set position, and then a second later realized, nah, his leg's not working how I wanted, so then I went back in and had to repose it again. But then right there, as you can see, his hand has some weird stretches on it. It's just a difficult process if you don't 100% mask off everything you don't want to move, and sometimes you think it is masked off and it's not. You're going to have weird stuff like that. Something's getting pulled one way when you don't realize it's not masked off, so that's one thing to be careful of. And then once you're done moving it, you're gonna have weird geometry, and I usually take the clay buildup tool and go in and fill in any areas, or take the flat in and smooth tools and smooth it out until I get normal flat looking geometry, and then you can sculpt on top of that to blend the layers back in. And that's just what I'm doing here. One thing you might notice if you follow me on Instagram or have watched my previous videos is I tend to sculpt a lot of creatures. Like in my previous video, I sculpted the Ender Dragon from Minecraft, or big muscly dudes. And it's not that that's all I can sculpt, it's just what's fun to sculpt to me. That's part of the reason I wanted to sculpt Venom. Is first off, I wanted to try doing a head like that with a wide open jaw. I just thought that'd be fun. And then once that worked out, I really wanted to sculpt the body, because when you do a character like this, or Thor a little bit in my previous videos, I sculpted a King Thor, and one of the similarities between the two is this: obviously they're just super shredded, but Thor, more realistically, I had to tone down some of the muscles, where with Venom, he's literally just a monster, so I can just go take it as far as I want. So like a lot of these muscles you're seeing connect his legs to his torso and vice versa, they're not real. Which is one thing, once you understand anatomy, is you can kind of make up muscles, and if you do it right, it'll look good. And obviously I'm not a professional. Like if a doctor or someone who knew every bone and every muscle in the human body looked at this, they would right off the bat say, yeah, this isn't real. You know, your calves can't get that big. That muscle there is not real. But I know human anatomy well enough that I think I can kind of bend the rules sometimes, and I think in this case it worked well enough. And also, being Venom, and well, being a superhero or a supervillain in general, I think lets you bend the rules already, because the realism is taken away a little bit. But also, Venom is a human, but he's covered in the symbiote, which is like a slime, kind of a gooey thing. And that kind of also inspired me to have some more weird muscles and tendrils and weird things like that. Alright, and here I'm just working on the legs, the shins in particular. The shins are another thing as far as anatomy that gives me trouble. Because if you're just working on like the calves and you want a muscular calf, you just make the calf bigger, you know, sculpt it out, make it look bigger, and you can put a divide in the middle of it. A shin, though, you kind of almost have to add muscles on the side, because the shin itself, the shin bone, is always there. You don't really have muscle going over it. I mean, you may, but you're not really gonna notice it. You're always gonna have to have that shin going down the front. Same with like a knee. You're never gonna get muscles big enough to cover your knee or your elbow. It's just certain parts of your skeleton are always going to show through. So sometimes I have trouble with that because if you sculpt too much muscle around him, it'll kind of hide that. And then here I actually added in a floor, so I know that his feet are going to line up on the same plane. Again, I'm going to eventually 3D print this, and I want it to be able to actually stand. So you want his feet to be 1 foot higher than the other and things like that. You want it to actually be able to stand, or at least if I have it printed on a platform, you want them also to be level so it looks proper. And then the feet, this whole time, even on Forger, I haven't really paid much attention, so now I'm finally going in and adding some detail to those. And I decided not to add toes, because again, he doesn't even have 5 fingers. He's got 4, or I guess 3 fingers and a thumb, so I didn't think it was too important to add toes, but I did add bones and veins to make it look realistic. And now I'm just going in and added veins throughout his body just for some final detail. This is one of my favorite parts, is adding veins. One of the things I love about adding veins to your sculpt is it helps sell the realism a little bit more. Not that I'm going for a hyper-realistic sculpt, but like a bodybuilder or someone like that, they're going to have veins pop, and if your muscles are big enough, your veins are going to show through. And I don't know that anybody's veins would pop as much as his are, but that's another one of the benefits of doing like a superhero or a monster like Venom. You can kind of push it. And here I'm trying to cut a hole in his jaw, or gums. I don't know what you would call this right here, but in a lot of the artwork for Venom, he has a hole right there. And it's something that you see in also like artwork for like a dragon or snakes sometimes. I don't know if snakes have it in real life or not, but they have a hole going through their gums and just have this little piece connecting it. And that's, I wanted to do that for this. And it actually gave me a lot of trouble, because here I put in a cylinder and then cut it away and then dynameshed it. But when I did it to the opposite side and dynameshed it, it actually healed the hole on the first side. So I had to go in with a cylinder that connected both sides and cut the hole through both sides, and that worked. And then I had to go in and resculpt the inside of his mouth and his tongue and fix up anything that I cut away there. But that was just kind of a problem that I didn't think would be a problem. So here I'm smoothing things out, adding any final details, any creases, anything like that, just because I'm about to start the coloring stage, and I just want to make sure that he's completely done and I'm happy with it. So then I went ahead and started coloring him. And here I'm just going through different textures that you can do. I'll be in purple, just I like that look for Venom. But I kind of go back and forth through a couple of them before I settle on one. And as far as coloring goes, I like coloring it for myself just to see what it would look like fully printed. But also I do it for these videos or for Instagram. I just feel like it looks more professional having a finished product rather than having everything I do just be grayscale, which is what I used to do. I used to just post everything grayscale because I used Forger, and the coloring on that wasn't great. Now that I have Zbrush, I like to actually go ahead and color them. But also, everything I sculpt, I have with the intention of 3D printing and putting on Etsy for sale, so you can buy my 3D prints and they'll come in pieces and you can glue them together and paint them yourself, or buy it as a fully put together and painted piece. And this is just also for that, just to kind of help get an idea of what it's going to look like. And once I get done with the coloring, then I'll go in and do some lighting passes, which you'll see in a second. I'll add different color lights in and do a couple of different renders and see how I like it. And then once I get that, how I'm liking it, then I'll go ahead and export a couple images. And those are, again, for the more promotional stuff, put it on Instagram or for a YouTube thumbnail. And then once I actually got those, then I went ahead and used this texture and textured his chest and his shoulders, because I wasn't quite sure if people would prefer a more smooth or a more textured version of Venom. But I'll put up some photos here and you can look at those and see which ones you prefer. So yeah, like I was saying, this is the textured version I did. I just wasn't sure what people would prefer, especially if I'm trying to sell this on my Etsy. If they prefer it to have a kind of a textured look, kind of like that new Venom movie with Tom Hardy, or more of a smooth look. I prefer the smooth look. that you see here, but just let me know in the comments what you think. Alright everybody, thanks for watching. Let me know what you think in the comments. Like, comment, subscribe. I got an Instagram account. It's also under Zane Customs, and the link will be in the description. I have a Etsy shop where I'm going to be selling all these. I don't have anything on there yet, but I will eventually be selling all these on there. And yeah, just check all that out. I have some other videos. I have one of me sculpting Thor, and one sculpting the Ender Dragon from Minecraft. I'm going to actually have a whole series of Minecraft videos where I take Minecraft creatures or characters and make them realistic. So my previous one was making the Ender Dragon more realistic, and my next one I got coming out next week will be the Enderman. So if you want to see those videos, subscribe. Thanks for watching. And here's a little sneak peek for next week's video.